It's like, I'm physical touch. It's like, okay, so do you want a hug or do you want me to eat your ass?
Yeah, right. What kind of physical touch are we talking about? But when you get cultures that are mixing, there's this inherent understanding that two different things are coming together and creating a new thing.
Yep.
And that has more sexual instinct in it.
SPSO is the predominant stacking across the world, and so it can easily fall into the demonization of the blind spot, which is what we all do with our blind spot.
The big hormone enneagram.
I'm John Lekovich, 415, sexual self-pres, 458 Trifix.
I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual, 9 with 1 wing, 974 Trifix.
What up, it's Emeka. I'm an 8-wing-7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I'm a 3-wing-4 self-pres social, a 369 Trifix.
Hi, I'm Alexandra. I'm a social self-preservation 9-wing-1, 963 Trifix.
If you like or hate us, make sure you go like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and make sure you leave us a review.
Yo! Welcome back to the show. We got a special show today because Alexandra and John aren't here. Those two lovebirds. Those two lovebirds. You know? Those two lovebirds. You know? Those two lovebirds. They don't care about us. They're off in a corner somewhere filling up their love cup. And in their absence, Nancy, David, and I made magic. We're still talking about instincts. Because you know what? It's spring. There's a fever, sex fever in the air, and hormones are moaning. So, you know, without any repugnant social types to get in the way of the divine degeneracy that this podcast is known for, I feel like we created some magic. Before we get into it, let me hit you with our usual plugs. We have some new announcements today. First of all, Nancy was on Josh's show, What It's Like to Be You. Josh interviewed her, and they talked about all sorts of things, her depression as a 3, and what you're good at. It's a really great interview. Check it out. I'll have a link in the show description, Josh's interview with her on his YouTube page. Secondly, there's a new podcast on the scene by our friends, the Dream Cream team, Kristen, Kaisa, and Sammy. Have started a new podcast called Sinsomnia on dreams and the unconscious and looking at the unconscious and the Enneagram through the prism of dreams. So if you enjoyed those podcasts that we recorded with Kristen in January on dream work, you can get more of that, but with triple cream 9ness. So check it out. It's going to be a link in the show description. Instinctual Drives in the Enneagram. It's the only instincts book that you need to read. If there's any other instincts book that you've come across, burn it, take a shit on it, and shame anyone that you see reading anything other than the Instinctual Drives in the Enneagram. But if you don't want to do all that, you can just buy the book on Amazon and leave a review if you're a decent person. The Enneagram School. Josh and John had started a new Enneagram school focused on foundational teachings and inner work practice. They've got a 6-part course on Josh's new theory of object relations in the centers. You know that object relations in the centers are the foundational structure of the Enneagram. And Josh and John have a new course that's illuminating and opens this theory up in a way that is far more usable for inner work. So check it out. DAA, Dark Arts Academy. You want to become dangerously perceptive and skilled at seeing the types clearly, because if you're not, what's the point of knowing all this stuff, knowing the Enneagram, if you can't apply it correctly to yourself and the people in your life? So what we've created is a library of weekly videos that explores all these different ways to make distinctions between types, that helps develop an intuition and the ability to make clear distinctions and to understand the implications of what these types are. So if you've been typed by us or typed by someone else and you want to understand your typing more deeply, check out DAA. And also recently, we just started a Discord. If you want to connect with other DAA members, you can check out the Discord in the members area. We have other perks and discounts, and you can find all this information at enneagrammer.com. David Gray's Trifix booklet. David Gray's got a groovy, jazzy, razzle-dazzle, archetypal exploration of the trifixes. It's got some cool imagery. It's got some evocative descriptions. People love it. You can get it at enneagram.com/store. Alexandra is the one and only and the world's leading expert on astrology and the Enneagram. If you want to understand the implications of how your astrological chart interfaces with your Enneagram typing, then hit up Alexandra at her website, SaturnRuled9.com. So yeah, enjoy this conversation without any of the fussy withdrawn types. Enjoy it.
Alexander's a no-show.
Why?
He completely forgot the time change.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Unacceptable.
Alexandra is a toxic 9.
Yeah.
That's
toxic
what this
all
is.
the way. Yeah.
That's why she likes watching things like Love is Blind.
Yeah, I thought I was the toxic one, but
It's like we fucking made a time change just for you, and you.
Did we have anything in mind to talk about?
No, I mean we had a couple threads. Yeah, what'd you have, Dick? We could talk about Dick.
I said your dick. Tell me when to stop.
We could talk about David's dick.
I still haven't sent the dick pics to Nancy.
Please. I am not consenting to that.
Yeah,
Okay.
She doesn't get enough.
50-year-old dick. I've seen enough of it. I'm good.
Okay.
She was paid handsomely to.
Yeah, I was paid to receive those dick pics.
Well,
so unless you're going to pay me, absolutely not.
I might
He
be able to
can
work
accommodate that.
Yeah.
He can accommodate
It's
that.
a hefty sum. I'm not.
All right.
It's mainly because I dislike most men. So
Okay.
Consent.
What a concept.
I know, right?
how did I get roped into this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Nancy, you get no help today. You're stuck in social blind land.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, just fuck me up. Why don't you?
you're going to be stuck with the social blind gut types. As
Yeah.
social blind as it gets.
It gets earthy.
Great.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about instincts lately.
I
Just a
saw
lot
that.
of different. The last one we just did was talking about different instinct love languages, and that's been interesting. We could go into that some more. We could we wanted to flesh them out from the point of view of each stacking, because I kind of think that the instinct love language is really skewed towards self-repressed social, but maybe not. Maybe you have a different viewpoint on them. You know, what do you feel like are instinct love languages that are missing that you might identify or relate to, or how would you change the love languages? That's an idea.
I mean, partly you're talking about specifically that one thing that's already out there. That's sort of the official.
Like the
Love languages.
the book of 5 love languages.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, how would you change them?
Mm.
How do you relate to them from the point of view of your instinct stacking, or what? And we were just talking about how each instinct is a religion. So what are some ways that you've seen yourself conceive of love that might have contrasted with the way a partner would have seen it, and things like that?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I've always thought like the physical touch one is like so vague.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm like, no, that's not. There's so much more to that.
Right.
It's like, I'm physical touch. It's like, okay, so do you want a hug or do you want me to eat your ass?
Yeah, right. What kind of physical touch are we talking about?
It's not the same.
And it's almost like ubiquitous for guys to say that their number one love language is physical touch. And it means so many
That's
things. And so
Also so inaccurate. Like, I don't know.
When you say it's inaccurate, you mean you've seen in guys what more like other things, gift giving, service, yada yada.
Yeah. I think like it's assumed like that their love language is physical touch, but it's like my friends and I constantly talk about how the media portrays men as having like these high sex drives and women never wanting to be like touched or like and that's just inaccurate of how actual humans are. And men think it's physical touch, but it's also like it's not.
So,
and giving love is different than receiving love too.
Your experience with sugaring, you could sort of give a masterclass on what men actually want from women, what they really want that they wouldn't admit with their mouths or say, but they're paying for what they're really. You have some intel.
Wasn't a lot of it like actual connection and stuff that they weren't getting? I mean, wasn't it almost
well,
relational?
it was like the men that would pay me was like a solid 50-50 split of like men who wanted connection and like intimacy and a partner, but like one they didn't have to take care of, right? They just wanted to receive that and have that in the moment and then be able to drop you, right? Which is fine. Like that's not an issue. That's literally what they're paying me for.
Right.
But they didn't want the constant intimacy. They wanted the intimacy then, when they were ready for it. Intimacy on their terms. And then the other 50% was they wanted a sex object that was not dead, that was not cold,
that was not unconscious.
Yeah, like
their wives
they
were.
just like, and they would say some really fucking demeaning things. Like these were not like I think I made it okay in my head because it was like, okay, maybe this isn't coming out in weird ways because you're like taking care of this here. But like really demeaning shit. Like I'm like, I really hope you don't think this on a daily basis because
like
this
like
is,
what? Like give me an example.
I don't know if I can pull a quote out of my head, but because I also disassociated for most of this.
That bad, huh?
No, it's not that bad. It's just like when you do it a lot, it's like, nah, you know, you don't take it in because you can't take it in.
Right.
Just like calling you a piece of shit slut.
Oh yeah, like all that was like run of the mill.
Right.
Just God, let's see. They would be like talking about how like this is all women are good for. Like this is like all I want any woman for. Like this is yeah, you're a piece of shit. Like you're useless to society. Like really demeaning shit. But like it was also like you have an understanding. Like generally, I wouldn't allow them to say that unless we had an understanding beforehand that was going to come out. Right.
Right.
It's like, okay, so I'm going to say really demeaning shit to you and you're going to be cool with it. And I'm going to be like, cool. And then afterwards they feed me food and take care of me and it was fine. But like, but that's what was in there.
So it's like paying for stuff, you know, certain unmet needs in their, you know, at home relationship. Like there's no spark, there's no edge, you know, they're not allowed to do certain things sexually. And so.
Well, actually, not a lot of them had an at-home relationship.
Okay.
Yeah, so I only had one that was like stepping out. And that quickly ended because it's just messy.
Right.
But yeah.
I think it's partly the polarity thing, right? They're because they're wanting a supercharged sexual thing. So the way to do that, to what would you call it, artificially juice it, is to make an adversarial kind of situation. Yeah,
and like the one specifically that would get really, really demeaning was because towards the end, once I had like curated my list, I only really had like 3 or 4. But the one that would get really demeaning, all he had was like work, and then he had separated from his wife and he had a kid. And so his relationship with his wife was very specific towards having that kid. And he had like, he did not go on dates. It was just me.
Yeah.
And then work.
When I lived in Mexico and I was teaching English, I got to make a lot of friends, just regular Mexican dudes. And even if they had families, you know, prostitution was much more normalized in Mexico. Like a strip club was basically a whorehouse. So the girls would come out and they'd do their dances. And if you liked one, there'd be a back room and you could do any series of things. I don't know if I've ever seen a strip club like that in the States. If I've not seen anything. So the back room is
that would be highly illegal.
Yeah, the back room is like it has all these like stall like setups where it's
stalls.
Yeah, it's separated by cloth, and there's a chair, and so you'd walk
a chair.
Yeah, like you'd walk by and you're watching like on the left this guy's fucking this girl, and then on the right he's getting his dick sucked. And
oh God, I can't. That's awful.
And so it was like a revelation because I had not at that point I was in my early 20s. I had not been to a strip club in the States, and so I just thought I didn't know that.
So you had no idea this was not cool.
I didn't know that this is what
States.
In the States. I didn't know. I had no idea what they were doing in the States. I mean, what I have learned since coming back is that they have strip clubs like this, but they're in really not good areas of town. Like in Chicago, you have strip clubs where, girls are getting paid to do all sorts of things, but it's not legal, right?
Yeah.
But in Mexico, it's very legal, very normalized. And so I'd see guys who had wives and kids who would have sex with the same girl twice in the same night. And it was totally fine. And I guess what I recognized for guys, from a guy's perspective, I've worked so hard. I've made all this money. I could go on a date. I could, and especially in Latin culture, it's very sort of like gendered in a way, like the romantic Latin lover sort of thing. Like you have to do certain things and take out to dinner. And so it's time to get to the point where you want to have sexual intimacy, blah, blah, blah. You have to go through all these steps. And from the guy's perspective, is like, if I'm going to spend all this time and money, I could just go straight to the thing and just pay for it.
Waste my time.
And I'm also going to get exactly what I want.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a compromise between two people. It's an exchange.
So what I'm trying to say is everyone should, if they need to, go pay for what you need.
Just do it. I mean, you're not the first. You won't be the last. There are hundreds and thousands of you.
Oldest business in the world.
It really is.
I went to a strip club about 10 or 15 years ago around here, and I had enough money to do the VIP room, which I just assumed was sexual contact of some kind, because it was fucking, I think it was $200 to get in to the room to go upstairs. And then I get up there with the girl and she says it's just going to be like her grinding on me with our clothes on.
And you can't touch.
And
I'm
can't
supposed
touch,
to get off. Yeah. And I was like, what the fuck did I just pay for? I had no idea. I just assumed there'd be some kind of
sexual
penal contact.
Yeah. So here's some context. In Mexico, the dollar goes so far. Like I started going out in Mexico, so I didn't realize how rich I was in Mexico. So because at the time it was like a dollar was like 12 pesos, and you could get a beer for like, I could get a beer for 50 cents.
Wow.
And so you could get a lap dance, a song for the duration of a song for $5. So I'd like spend $30 and this girl would be on me for like a half hour, and I could touch and do whatever I wanted. And so then based on that, like a blowjob was like $50, which is nothing. And then sex was like 100, 150.
Absolutely not. Yeah, no, it was like $450 to $500 for like 3 hours.
Damn, that's what you were making?
Oh yeah, and I never stayed. They would ask me to stay over. I'm like, no, you have to pay. I would make up an outrageous number. I'm like, I'm not sleeping in your fucking bed.
Damn, that's a good money.
Oh yeah, and it would be like once a week, twice a week. I'm like, yeah, sure.
That's really good money.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I mean, the market for female sexual interest and attention in this country anyway, it's a career. Like even you don't have to do anything sexual. You can do even camgirling is very, very lucrative.
Although with like SESTA and FOSTA being passed previously, it's the website's being shut down. I don't even know how you would go about it now, aside from OnlyFans. Like I truly don't know how you would go about it.
Is that the thing that shut down Craigslist or whatever? Is it that kind of? Okay.
Yeah, it put the onus of keeping sex workers off of your platform onto the website, so they just completely shut it down.
So the way that you were doing it before, you were getting clients off of Craigslist?
No, it wasn't Craigslist. There was a There was a website.
Sugar daddy site. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a sugar daddy site. I forget the name of it, but it's shut down now. So.
Wow.
Yeah. I've done a couple of those sites.
Yeah, and that was great because you could you wouldn't take newer profiles, right? Because if they have had previous,
there'd be a review.
Yeah,
right.
they had. Well, you couldn't review them, but you could kick people off the site basically.
Mm-hmm.
So if they had been on there for a couple months and done this before, then they're probably good to go. So you can kind of vet them a little.
What do you guys think about this country as a whole? Because it weirds me out that this is one of the most sexual countries in the world in terms of producers of porn and producers of eroticism to some degree, but at the same time it has this really conservative underbelly so it has this sexual underbelly, but it has this conservative trying to shut down sex work. Whereas in countries in any country in South America, it feels like the sexual instinct is much more culturally a part of things there, where there's much more open sexuality. But here it's this weird combination of a lot of sexuality, but also some hidden conservatism that I don't understand. What do you think is the U.S.'s stacking, I guess, or what do you think is going on there, where there's this kind of dichotomy between a lot of sexuality, but then we want to shut down sex work at the same time?
I think partly it's, the predominance of SPSO. I think that's everywhere, is my opinion. But I think the sex part, since it's not as much about, for guys, I guess you'd say, about being attractive. So they're just doing sex in the SPSO like a bodily need, like a functional, I need to get this wad out kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it's this place is super commercialized, right? Everything's for sale. And if you're a business person, or immigrants come to this country because it's the best country in the world to make money and to make business. And so it's weird to me that the oldest business in the world, which is, sex work, is really demonized here compared to a lot of places in the world. We're really back asswards on this, that I don't understand. What the fuck is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right about it being SPSO dominant because it's very compartmentalized.
Right.
It's this is where the sex is, and the rest is taboo. But I mean, it was also colonized by white Anglo-Saxons, Protestant.
Sure.
you know, with Christianity being the number one thing, and then, but not just Christianity, Catholicism, which is a whole other level of bullshit shaming around sex and sex work. So
maybe what it is that it's kind of a decentralized money exchange that can't really be corporatized and control. You know how the relationship to, the weed industry, until they figured out how to make it so that huge companies can now make money. They were sending people to prison.
Huge white-owned companies.
Exactly. So now it's it was a thing that was illegal, and normal people could make money dealing weed or whatever, and they were going to prison for it. And now that, rich old white dudes have figured out a way to make, millions out of that industry, now it's all legal and it's cool. And so maybe what it is that big corporate interests there's no way to monetize sexuality or sex work in a way that that would be acceptable. So we just have to sort of sweep it under the rug because we can't make money from it.
And that's why a lot of sex workers don't actually want it legalized. They want it decriminalized, because when you decriminalize it, you can still be safe, but not have these giant companies take it over and make it into a corporate profit machine. Decriminalizing it would put the control back in the sex workers' hands.
Yeah.
But they're not going to do that.
Because, I wonder sometimes, because there are other religiously conservative, South America was colonized by the Spanish, which brought in a lot of Catholicism. And so there's a lot of conservatism around sexuality, but there is still kind of this understanding that even in the courtship rituals and the way people date, there is kind of more of a, maybe because of the climate, there's more of a allowance for the sexual instinct. Seduction is more of, the meme of a Latin lover.
Yeah.
So like having a mistress is like an acceptable thing.
Right.
Those kinds of things.
No, there's more understanding that it's like underneath it all, everyone is a sexual beast or whatever. And I mean, that's part of the culture there. Whereas we're under the delusion here that not everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
It's something like that. There's some, strange hypnosis there around thinking some people are just good people or something or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's not just a delusion, it's like forced onto us as a need, right? Because the second that stops being necessary, then I feel like some of us get out of the corporate under from the corporate thumb, right? And society will collapse.
It's this, to your point, it's looking at culture as almost like an instinctual meme. Like, the Anglo-Saxon is, it's almost like you create these cultures to survive where you're at. And it feels like the Anglo-Saxon, because it's cold, there's this kind of like nuclear family. You take care of your own, you build up your resources because winter's coming and we got to work.
Like a scarcity mindset.
Yeah. And it would make sense that something like capitalism and everything that comes along with that would spring up from that kind of culture. Whereas the tropical parts of the world, things are slower. There's not this like, we have to save up for the winter thing. And so maybe it would allow for more of the useless display of the sexual instinct. But I want to say this, though. There's something specific about Latin culture. They talk about the Romance languages. Because African culture is very much conservative around much more. I don't want to say similar to Anglo-Saxon culture, but it's kind of like Asian cultures, I would say, is also conservative around sexuality. And I don't know why that is, but it's an interesting topic of, the cultural memes, what instinctual preferences they represent and where they came from.
Yeah, it might be a thing of partly in the Latin cultures, there's some kind of mix in the religious mythology space where you've got the Catholicism, but there's also something that's, I don't know, from the Aztecs and all that shit and all the, where, I mean, some of which to me was, and the Mayans and all that stuff, and some of that is people would say related to actually the Egyptian influence, the ancient Egyptian influence, which to me is kind of a model of what a civilization could be like if the sexual instinct was fully integrated into the daily life and even the spiritual life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think all these other countries where it's more sort of, I don't know, mono-religious or something where there's one religion, you don't have that that integration of whatever that sort of Egyptian serpentine mysticism, that's where that comes in. Where because, and again, I think it's because SPSO is the predominant stacking across the world, and so it can easily fall into the demonization of the blind spot, which is what we all do with our blind spot. So unless it's in the mythology, right?
Yeah.
In the religion, because we're talking about religion with the instincts here, right? So, yeah.
So kind of wanted to take a different track with it, but kind of the same. Because I know John, if he were here, would bring up this book called Sex at Dawn.
Yeah. I've listened to it a few times.
Yeah, it's a good book.
It's great.
But it discusses how basically monogamy was created alongside what's it called? Like farming,
the agrarian,
agrarian lifestyle, because you needed to have
ownership.
Paternal assurance, right? That this is my kid, so that I'm not taking, so that I'm not taking care of other people's kids with my lack of resources. But before, all resources were everybody's, so it didn't matter.
Right.
So it's like that kind of created this weird thing around sex and like who's having sex with who, because you need to be sure whose kid is whose.
Mm-hmm.
No, and that does fit in with the whole Egyptian thing I've been listening to.
And the SPSO thing too.
Right. Because that was a big part of the ancient Egyptian, whatever, religious structure or mythology and so forth, was that sort of abundance of life and so forth. And, well, just it was the exact opposite of scarcity mindset. So if you've got this sense of this fecundity of everything, and it's all there to just pick from a tree, that's a whole other mindset.
You know, while you guys are saying that, I realized that the role that the sexual instinct plays from, in sexual selection is that this is the instinct that would push one to leave their group, their family unit, or their group of families to go find the interesting sexual partner that's different. When you start hoarding resources, and you start getting protective about what we have versus what that group over there has, and you start getting protective about whose kid is who in the family unit, that's what creates these countries, and that's what creates these wars. And so that's really hardened as self-pres social. But what the sexual instinct does is that it creates these interesting mixes. And so when you get trans-cultural, trans-racial, mixing, that is what the sexual instinct is there for, because it gets you to cross boundaries and look for unexpected combinations. And so when I was thinking about Latin culture is a mix already. Like when I think about African culture, it's like it's homogenous. Asian culture, homogenous. Anglo-Saxon culture, homogenous.
Yep.
But when you get cultures that are mixing, there's this inherent understanding that two different things are coming together and creating a new thing.
Yep.
And that has more sexual instinct in it. And I also noticed that a lot of people who are of mixed race, because they're having to navigate between two different cultures, two different identities, it forces you to sort of take a more, because you can't be comfortable in either identity. And so you have to sort of create a new one or a singular one. And it forces you into that more sexual instinct
that's right.
pathway.
Hybridization kind of thing. Yeah.
So I'm thinking on a cultural level that the cultures that have that baked in are going to have more allowance for what the sexual instinct represents than the cultures that are like sort of crystallized and baked into we're all the same and we want to keep our resources the same. That sort of SPSO nationalism. Right. It's all like us versus them versus like sexual instinct is like, hey, I want to fuck whoever is the most interesting, sexy person, wherever they're from.
I think we solved it all.
Yeah.
Because coming from Nigeria and being social blind, I didn't know to the extent, because I just look at the world like, wow, there's just so many different cultures in the world. As a kid, I was like, I assumed that everyone is trying to have sex with everybody. That people are just, you look at like all the different races and there are just so many interesting combinations that could come up. And I just imagined that people were like having sort of travel lust or like wanting to like go all over the world and experience different things. So coming here was a huge culture shock, and because I was just really excited about like the Americas is the biggest melting pot in the world. And so I thought that everybody wanted to mix with everybody. So to come here and to realize like there's such a huge racial tension, and there's such, especially between white and black people, and that there's such a, just learning about the history, and I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I still have a hard time wrapping my head around the amount of like racial tension between us versus them that keeps people apart. Like, don't you want to just fuck people that are different than you? Why do you just want to be around people who look like you all the time? Why do you just want to eat the same foods? Like, what is the big fear? Like, what is? I guess that's what I've tried to understand. Like, what is the big fear that the people that are different from you, what are they going to take away?
Yeah, it's another extreme example, I guess, of sort of an SPSO mindset of somehow you're going to be depleted or something of something. Or, I mean, again, it probably crossing races sexually sort of is metaphorical for the sexual instinct.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's an instinctual bias with the sexual blind stackings.
Ooh.
Yeah.
My mom is super traditional Igbo Nigerian and self-presocial too. And so there's this meat market kind of approach to sexuality in the sense that she looks at marriageability in terms of, resources, age, how many kids you've had. So she's very, very practical about it. But with self-presocial, there's kind of like a concern about the bloodline. Because your father was this person.
I think it's both social and self-pres.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
But there's this concern about like continuing propagating the family and who your kids are. And I can understand a lot of like white people's fear around interracial coupling is like that essentially destroys the purity of the bloodline.
Mm-hmm.
And, people might frown when they hear white people say that, but I mean, my mom feels the same way about like, oh, you came from this person and my parents are, the Okorofor bloodline. And so when she found out that who I was dating, my last relationship, she was genuinely hurt that I did not partner with someone who could continue my dad's legacy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I know, right?
That's so intense.
I was just like, your legacy.
What have you created? What is your legacy?
It's like, your children and their children, and that represents you, and that's like your bloodline. But it's like old world thinking, but that's very much at the core of all this shit that we're talking about, this cultural, instinctual bias to keep our own, and what the sexual instinct represents as a risk to that. Like it screws up the whole thing, right?
It's kind of like the nationalism thing where it's like self-pres, I don't know, is me and my body and therefore my lineage infused with a certain social set of standards and principles and so forth. And so, so you've got to keep that clean.
And if you look at like how our culture, American culture, treats like the sexual instinct taking over, right?
Yes.
It's so demonized, like, but in the self-pres way of like, oh, all of your resources are going to be taken away. Like everything's going to crumble around you. House is gone. Friends are gone. Like job's gone. Like it's borderline illegal. Like, so it's just so demonized in the self-pres way, right?
Yeah.
For the sexual instinct takeover.
Yeah, I would imagine the social instinct demonizing the sexual is like the social shame.
Yeah, losing like your core group or whatever.
Multiple things. I mean, it's shame. There's a thing around purity in various ways with social,
Yeah.
And not wanting to mix.
But no, that was a huge realization to me that most people are afraid of the consequences of what the sexual instinct might represent. Because, I mean, when you're turned on by someone, it has no consideration for your politics. It has no consideration for what's practical or what would be acceptable. You just want what you want. So, I mean, that's why you get like the Bible Belt is the highest porn consumption part of this country.
Right.
And so there's this, it's just unbridled wanting, which can cross so many boundaries. Like you might be really attracted to someone who your parents might not approve of, or who you might not couldn't imagine starting a family with, but you want to fuck them. Yeah.
It's why you've got so many rules and such, cultural, activation or reactivity around sex and attraction in the workplace.
Yeah.
Because it's a place where we're supposed to keep it together and just get things done.
Self-pres social.
Yeah.
But
and only self-pres social.
Yeah, exactly.
We are not dynamic humans in the workplace.
Yeah.
Didn't they say that most relationships start in the workplace?
Yeah.
It's unavoidable.
Surprised. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's who you spend most of your life with, is who you work with. So it's not your friends, it's not your spouse, it's your coworkers.
Yeah, that's always been a tough one for me because it feels, I mean, we talked about how like the instincts are at war with each other, and it feels to me that the more social I get, the less sexy a dynamic gets. Like hooking up with people I work with has just never been, I don't know, like for whatever reason.
It's not hot.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't. It's very self-pres social, I guess, is what I'm saying. Because it doesn't. For me, there's not enough polarity there. Maybe there was polarity with this person, and it never went away. Like it. But if we got comfortable working together, and then to have like something sexual come out of that, it wouldn't be very hot. Like that's my bias. That's what my instinctual talking is biased for.
Depends on the environment. I mean, I used to work at restaurants, and restaurants, it's a lot of young people in their 20s and stuff that are
restaurants
going
are
out.
a cesspool.
Oh man, and everybody's going out and partying and
fucking each other in bathrooms. Let's go. After they do lines of cocaine off each other. Oh, yeah, man, completely. Restaurants are crazy.
Yeah. Bars and restaurants. Yeah, everybody ages exponentially in those environments.
It's so fast.
You see a girl because I worked at a bar. You'd see a girl come in there and she's like 21, 22. She's trying to get her first job in just a matter of a year. She's just been ran through and she's doing so many drugs.
Oh, it's bad. It's bad. Do you guys watch Vanderpump? Oh, no, you don't watch Vanderpump Rules. But have you heard about Vanderpump Rules?
Just heard the name.
What is that?
Of course not. Of course not. It's a terrible just reality TV show of these pretty people in LA who work in a super expensive restaurant or bar or whatever. And we're now like 5 seasons in, and these people are not doing okay, man. Their lives are crumbling around. Like all of their lives have crumbled. And then if you like look at them close up, they all have gotten way too much work done. And it's just like they're backsliding so fast. It's hilarious.
It's a rough life. Like, staying up late, doing a lot of drinking.
No, those were some of my major fuckboy days working at restaurants.
Anytime I wanted to get laid in Richmond, there's a specific bar where all the restaurant workers go after they get off.
Yeah.
That's where you go, man. That's where you go. That's home sweet home. That's what it's called.
Yeah. I got a lot of, you get smarter about hooking up once you work in an environment like that because you just watch people do it so much. And I learned that you don't need to go out and early. Just go out and get there at midnight and stay there for a half hour.
Yeah, we're talking 25 minutes max.
I know, right?
Let's go.
People are making their sexual decisions. This is not a decision that involves any thought. They're just grabbing the nearest person that fits the bill and they're going home. Like it's just like watching a meat market. Self-pres social, like I'm drunk enough now. Who's batter up? Who's
Yeah.
And there's like a front patio, so if you really want to have a fun time, you can go out towards the front patio and just watch people. Just watch people after 12:30 at home sweet home, and they're just like pairing off left and right.
That was just one of the most shocking things about going out and watching people hook up. It was like I thought there was more to it, like the sexual bias that I have is like, there's going to be a seduction and a dance. There's going to be we're going to lock eyes and we're going to have this whole thing before it happens.
That's cute.
I know. Like I just didn't know that it was just I'm going to drink enough to feel loose, and the first person that it's like at a grocery store, I'm going to grab the first thing that fits for me and I'm going to go home and eat. And I never want to see this person again. It really took me a long time. Like, really?
That gets at another thing that is part of my, associations with sexual instinct is drugs and alcohol. Because that's what opens up that realm for people that are sexual blind, especially. is that kind of, because that's where you get the transgression, the crossing the boundaries thing of what you would do in your normal, straight, boxed-in life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're going to spill over the edges.
And if you're already doing something that you're not supposed to, you might as well just keep doing it.
That's right. You want to intensify it.
Right.
Which is
might as well go
also
hard. Go hard to go home, right?
Partly sexual instinct, right? You'd want to crank up the fire. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd have these hot nights with strangers, and I was thinking, oh, that's great. Let's have another hot night. And I'm like, nope.
Ghosted. Done. They don't even remember you now. 10 years later, they're like, no.
I just couldn't wrap my head around, like, you had a hot night and you didn't want to have another hot night with that person.
Why wouldn't you?
What?
Yeah, the only reason that I would stick with one person, like, I had like a few like booty call guys. Mm-hmm. The only reason I would stick with one person was because it was like simple. Like, I knew that you were what was going to happen. I knew you were safe. I knew you were clean. Otherwise,
and it probably wasn't going to be anyone. It seems like the more heat there is, like legitimate heat, the more people, self-pressed social people, I'm assuming, don't want to return to it because there's more of a risk that you might catch feelings. The more mechanical or just okay and simple it was, the more likely it would continue. And then sometimes the more heat there is, the more legitimate chemistry that's there. It's like, well, no, I don't want to. That might go somewhere.
That.
Exactly.
I don't want to mess up my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, for this person, I mean, who knows who what kind of job they have, what kind of family they have. Yeah. They tell themselves that it's too dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're a bad boy.
Yeah. That's one thing I realized. Like, this is a self-pressed social thing. Don't try to make it any more than that. Like, the more chemistry that is you try to find, the more it's actually getting in the way of what everyone is trying to do in this environment, which is, just go home with somebody and have some fun.
Yeah, there were
ruin it with sexual instincts.
Shut the fuck up. The guys, the guys that would, the clients that would pay me when I was doing sex work, most of them would like request to have like small talk beforehand, but small talk only. And
not real talk.
No, if it got deep, it was only about them.
Uh-huh.
They do not want to hear about you. They don't want any connection. They don't want to small talk. They want to feel like they aren't making an object out of you, but really otherwise they would just do it.
Right.
That's the only reason. They don't want a connection.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Because, I mean, you would think that people who hook up at bars just want to just do I mean, sometimes people do, but people do want to talk. But it's like what you're saying. It's like surface level conversation about, oh, you do this, but... And so, I mean, as a sexual type, like, inevitably spilling too much information about myself that's actually me, which is probably ruining the thing that you're talking about. That it's just, hey, I want to feel like you're a person to me, but I don't actually want you.
I want to make sure you're a warm body.
I don't want you to like put so much of your personality into this dynamic where I'm just.
Yeah, no. Anytime I try to like be a human, unless it was like those two guys that were like, I want a human for an hour or two with me. They were like, shut the fuck up. Why are you like, stop it right now. Suck on my toes.
Yeah, that was kind of important for me to understand, because there's this sexual instinct way of getting naked, psychologically and spilling yourself. That what can feel intrusive or invasive to self-pressed social type. It's like, wait, whoa, how did we get here? Why are our clothes off, and why are we talking about our secrets? All that kind of stuff. Go ahead.
It was kind of hilarious. So Josh is social self-pres, right?
Yes. Oh yeah, you guys did your interview.
It was
what it's like to be.
I listened to it all. It was great.
Oh, good. It was
the contrast between you guys is stark.
Yeah, it is. And also the similarities are hilarious to me because both of us like would discuss these deep things in a very like beep boop bop. We are talking about deep emotions way.
Yeah.
And it was just funny with like both of us trying to go deep and both of us being a 3 and like a Bermuda 3 at that. So we're just like,
yeah.
I am uncomfortable.
It's really easy also to see the difference between secondary 6 for you and secondary 9.
True.
Like, you come across like much more, you have much more, is it sassy edginess maybe?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Yeah, the 6 sort of reactive thing, wanting to poke and find out what's underneath things. Yeah.
Oh, is that what that is?
That's really noticeable between you
Yeah,
guys.
because Josh he likes my jokes, but he does not always laugh at them. And he'll say he likes my jokes. He's like, oh, you're so funny. And I'm like, but you never laugh at me. Like, I'll say something. He's like, aha.
3 with 9 is like really hard for me to read sometimes. It's like the professional mask. I can really feel that.
Yeah, sometimes his like not professional mask would peek out, but it would just be like doop, 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 like real quick. It's Josh is great. I love him. It was very fun to do that interview, but it was just very apparent.
Yeah. All right, guys. That should be an episode. I'll wrangle some shit
think it's good
from that.
Yeah.
Okie doke.
All right, yo.
Okay.
Bye.
See y'all.
Talk to you later.
I was in the 212, I'm the uptown A nigga, you know what's up or don't you? Word of who made ya? I'm a rude bitch nigga, what are you made up of? I'ma eat your food up, boo, I could bust your 8, I'ma do 1 2, fuck it, gun do. When you do make bucks, I'ma look right, nigga, bet you do 1 2, fuck. Fuck 'em like you do 1 2, come, you gated, get discovered, I'm a 2 1 deuce, cock, a lickin' in the water by the blue bayou, caught the warm goose, and you do rag too, son. Nigga, you're a Kool-Aid dude, plus your bitch might lick it, wonder who let you come to 1 2, what you do to crew, son? Fuck are you into, huh?